We're going back further than we ever have before for the start of this video. I'm talking millions of years, back to the Ice Ages, when Earth was pushing glaciers around any way it wanted to. Now because it was doing that, it created some pretty cool stuff. And one of those things was a small pond near what would go on to become Aurora, Ohio, and what would go on to become Geauga Lake. Now we're going to fast forward millions of years, and that's going to bring us to the early 1800s, when European settlers were taking over North America. When a fellow by the name of Sullivan Giles decided that he was going to build his ranch on the shores of this beautiful pond. And he did just that, and the pond was referred to as Giles Pond. Now fast forward about 40 years, the Giles family still going strong in the same location. The railroad is the main source of transportation in the United States at this time, and it ran right by Giles Pond. And the pond quickly became a very popular tourist destination for people to stop at on the railroad and take a swim. Now Mr. Giles saw all this and thought, well, if all these people are stopping on my property, I might as well profit from it. So Mr. Giles built himself a very small precursor to a family fun center, if you will. Picnic tables, the swimming, that kind of stuff. And it operated just like that for 20 years. Now we're going to fast forward to 1887, when Alexander Kent came along, and he was the first person that really envisioned this place as an amusement park. He bought the property from the Giles family, and later that year officially opened Geauga Lake. And 2 years after that, the park added its very first amusement park ride, a steam-powered carousel. Now fast forward to 1925, when another fella came along, William Coleman, and he wanted to take Mr. Kent's idea to the next level, and he purchased the park. And that year added the very first roller coaster in the park's history, the Big Dipper. Now Mr. Coleman wanted to turn this into a year-round operation, a resort if you will. And throughout the 1930s, he added a movie theater, a racetrack, a bowling alley, things of that nature. And the popularity of Geauga Lake skyrocketed, despite the Great Depression. Now jump skip to 1945, when William Coleman's nephews, Harvey and Charles Schreier, took over ownership of the park, along with a local attorney, Carl Adrian. Now these three gentlemen owned and operated the park for about 25 years, and under their ownership, in 1953 we got a Rocco plane, and 5 years later in 1958 we got some flying scooters, and a wood steel hybrid wild mouse known as Wild Mouse. Now we're going to fast forward to 1969, and I think this is one of the coolest ownership stories in theme park history. As 4 former Cedar Point employees got together, said, we could do this, pooled all their money together, started their own company known as Funtime Inc, made an offer on Geauga Lake, and the offer was accepted. Now these boys immediately removed the racetracks. They wanted to pump in more rides. And under the first year of Funtime Inc.'s ownership, we did get 2 new attractions, a monorail which took you all the way around the park known as Bel Air Express, and a Ferris wheel known as Ferris Wheel. Now this is the part in the story that I think is really cool. Now these 4 young men got together with another group of 4 young men who opened SeaWorld San Diego earlier in the decade and were looking to expand their company. So the Funtime boys got together with the SeaWorld boys and said, hey, why don't you open another park across the lake here, and we can co-promote each other and help each other out. And the following year in 1970, SeaWorld Ohio opened up literally right next door to Geauga Lake. Now the cool part was these guys were peaceful neighbors with each other for the next 30 years. The following year in 1971, Wild Mouse was removed, and it was sent back into Chippewa Lake Park in nearby Chippewa Lake, Ohio, and it operated there for 7 years until 1978 when it closed along with that park. 1972 saw 2 new attractions added to the park, an aerodynamics classic car ride known as Merry Oldies, and a log flume known as Gold Rush. 1973 was the first year the park did a pay-one-price entrance fee. Also that year we got a boat ride known as Big Ditch. In 1974 the park added an intimate observation tower standing nearly 200 feet tall, known as Skyscraper. The following year for 1976 the park added a Huss Enterprise known as Silver Bullet. Also that year the park added a Pinfari Z47, known as Cyclone. The 1977 season saw an aerodynamics custom looper called Double Loop added to the park. Fun fact, first roller coaster in the world to feature 2 consecutive vertical loops. The following year for 1978, the park added kinda sorta the same thing, but this one was the mass-produced aerodynamics corkscrew model. 2 years later, for the 1980 season, the park removed Cyclone, and it was moved to Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana, where it operated there as Firecracker for 16 years until 1997, where it was sold to Jolly Roger Amusement Park in Ocean City, Maryland, and it operated there until 1998, until it was officially laid to rest. For the 1981 season, the park added a classic rotor. The following year of 1982, the park removed its Rocco plane. 3 years later, for the 1985 season, the park removed its boat ride, the Big Ditch, but replaced it with another boat ride known as Lighthouse Cruise. Now, it was also that year that their across-the-lake neighbors, SeaWorld, at the time were owned by hardcore Brace Jovanovich, and they were the first ones that truly envisioned this place as one huge park. And they made Funtime an offer to buy Geauga Lake, but the offer was rejected. So everything continued on as is, and 3 years later for the 1988 season, the park added a roller coaster from my all-time favorite, and by that I mean least favorite ride manufacturer of all time. I'm talking about the Din Corporation, and the ride itself was a wooden roller coaster known as Raging Wolf Bob's. 3 years later, for the 1991 season, the park added a flying carpet attraction manufactured by Weber known as El Dorado. For the 1993 season, the park added the very first Huss topspin added in the United States, known as the Texas Twister. Now, 1995 was a pretty wild year, as Funtime Inc. ran into a little bit of financial troubles, and they had to unload all their parks, and they did, to Premier Parks LLC. And they immediately removed Corkscrew, and that was sold to MGM Dizzy World in Mutakata, India, where it still operates today as simply Roller Coaster. For the 1996 season, the park added 2 new attractions, a Vekoma boomerang known as Mindy Racer, and an Intamin Rapids attraction known as Grizzly Run. It was also that year that the park's log flume Gold Rush was renamed to Cuyahoga River Logging Company. For the 1997 season, the park added Mr. Hyde's Nasty Fall, an Intamin first-generation freefall ride that operated at numerous different locations before that, most notably Six Flags Great America, as The Edge. 1998 is arguably the most important year in theme park history, as it truly shaped the future for a number of different amusement parks. That was the year that Premier Parks purchased all of the Six Flags properties, as they were on an absolute tear at the time, which included Geauga Lake. And they immediately added a Vekoma SLC known as Serial Thriller and a 3D theater known as Harbor Theater. We also saw the removal of the park's original Ferris wheel. But we got a bigger, better, and nicer Ferris wheel the following year for 1999, as we said hello to Americana and a Chance inverter known as Time Warp. Also that year we saw the removal of the flying scooters. The new millennium saw Six Flags decide that they wanted to invest a ton of into this park. And by I mean $40 million expansion. The park's officially renamed Six Flags Ohio, and they had so many new rides, it's gonna take a minute to get through them all. Let's go. First up, we had Roadrunner Express, manufactured by Zaire, one of their family coasters. A 157-foot tall custom-built B&M floorless coaster known as Batman Night Flight. A custom-built CCI wooden roller coaster known as Villain. A motion simulator attraction known as Mission Bermuda Triangle. A Hopkins Shoot the Chutes known as Shipwreck Falls. And we also saw the removal of the Rotor and Lighthouse Cruise. Now, 2001, okay, this is also one of my top 5 favorite theme park stories. It's just so wild and so cool if you're a fan of the business. So Busch Entertainment, who owned and operated SeaWorld Ohio right next door at the time, and all the Busch Gardens and SeaWorld parks for that matter, wanted once and for all to combine these two parks and make just one huge park. So they approached Six Flags with an offer. And this is where it gets fun. Six Flags counter offers their offer. Busch Entertainment says, oh, okay, accepts the offer, and now Six Flags owns the place. They immediately renamed the park Six Flags Worlds of Adventure, and it was, at the time, the world's largest theme park at 700 acres. And they pumped in some additions right away, most notably X-Flight, a Vekoma flying coaster, Bounty, a Chance Sea Dragon, and a pair of relaxing ferry boats known as Cuyahoga Queen and the Aurora Belle. And also that year we saw the log flume, the Cuyahoga River Logging Company, renamed to Deer Park Plunge. Now by combining these parks you would think, my god, what an amazing idea, so simple and obvious too. But it ended up being a bad idea, and attendance plummeted for some reason. So 2 years into this incredibly ambitious adventure, Six Flags said, oh, so I think Six Flags saw this ship a-sinking. So fast forward 2 years, they quickly added a water park known as Hurricane Harbor, removed the Silver Bullet attraction, and put this gargantuan of a park up for sale. The highest bidder turned out to be their biggest competitor, as Cedar Fair purchased the park, immediately reverted its name back to its original form as Geauga Lake, and all the DC and Looney Tunes IP is immediately removed, and that led to a number of attraction renames. Most notably, the Roadrunner Express became the Beaverland Mine Train, Mindy Racer became Headspin, Serial Thriller was now known as Thunderhawk, Batman Flight Night was known as Dominator, the water park Hurricane Harbor was officially renamed Hurricane Hannah's, and Superman The Ultimate Escape was now known as Steel Venom. And we also saw the removal of Mission Bermuda Triangle. For the 2005 season, we saw Cedar Fair build and open their own water park in Wildwater Kingdom. And we also saw the removal of the ferry boats and Mr. Hyde's Nasty Fall. For the 2006 season, it became painfully obvious that Cedar Fair was in major financial trouble, as Hurricane Hannah's didn't open at all, and as a matter of fact, was later announced that it permanently was closed. And a number of main attractions just began to disappear. As we saw the removal of Bel Air Express, that was scrapped. Steel Venom was packed up and moved to fellow Cedar Fair park Dorney Park, where it still operates today as Possessed. And we saw X-Flight moved on over to Kings Island, where it operated there as Firehawk until 2018 when it was scrapped. So it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Cedar Fair had something in mind. And they announced that the 2007 season would be the final operating year of this legendary park. And once the summer season came to a close on September 16th, Geauga Lake closed its doors for good. So what happened to all those rides? Well, some survived and were moved to fellow Cedar Fair parks or other various parks across the world. Others just died with the park, sadly. The ones that did survive were the Beaverland Mine Train, and this one was not moved to a fellow Cedar Fair park. This one was sold to a park in France known as Puppy Park, where it operates still today as Roller Coaster. Shipwreck Falls was sold to Celebration City in Branson, Missouri, where it operated there for just 1 year until that park went out of business, and it closed with that park. The pirate ship known as Bounty was sold to water park conglomerate Schlitterbahn, and the remainder of the attractions that survived stayed within the Cedar Fair family. The carousel was moved over to Worlds of Fun, where it still operates today. The Huss Topspin Texas Twister was moved over to California's Great America in Santa Clara, California, where it operated there as Firefall until 2016 when it was laid to rest. The Vekoma Boomerang Headspin was moved over to Carowinds, where it still operates there today as Flying Cobras. The Vekoma SLC Thunderhawk was moved over to Michigan's Adventure, where it still operates there today under the same name. And the following 3 attractions were all moved to King's Dominion in Doswell, Virginia. The B&M Floorless known as Dominator, the Ferris Wheel known as Americana, and El Dorado, which is the only one of those 3 attractions that is no longer in operation. And that sadly brings us to the rides that died with the park. That list includes the Double Loop, Raging Wolf Bob's, Villain, the Harbor Theater, Grizzly Run, Merry Oldies, the Pepsi Plunge, Skyscraper, Time Warp, and the legendary Big Dipper, which was actually put up for auction on eBay, and sadly there were no buyers. So Cedar Fair decided that their only major investment that they made to this park's history was the water park Wildwater Kingdom, and it would remain open. And it remained open for the next 9 years, while the theme park portion of this place just sat rotting. Fast forward to 2016, the city of Aurora and Cedar Fair decided to work together to try to redevelop this land. And 2016 was the final operating year of Wildwater Kingdom, and it officially closed its doors at the end of the season. So like I mentioned, the city of Aurora and Cedar Fair cooperated together into reconstructing this place, and in August of 2020, the redevelopment stage began, as they was going to build 308 residential units, some commercial space, and some city parkland. And that brings us to today. Geauga Lake's history is absolutely mind-boggling. This is easily one of my most favorite videos that I've had the privilege to produce. So thank you for those who recommended me doing Geauga Lake. The park has definitely left a huge stamp on the history of amusement parks. I mean, heck, it was once the largest theme park in the world. And when I'm an old piece of on my deathbed, one of the things that is going to haunt me is the fact that I never got to visit Geauga Lake.